get you some experience to it. It's my understanding that the ULCT does participate in the NLC, like Cameron, I know, has gone to some of these conferences and things. But I will tell you that in the years the cities I've worked for, I think only one or two have gone to it from Utah. And partly because of the cost and the perspective, but anyway, there's a whole bunch of numbers, and really what we need to know, I think, from the budget perspective is, one, do you want to be a membership, or do you want to go as non-members? And if you want to go as non-members, which conference and how many?
Can you tell us what the benefit of being a member of non-member is?
I believe you have access to the reports and the studies that they do. And that's probably, I think, probably the biggest part of that.
Yeah, it's just like being a member of the league. They're an advocate for cities at any kind of a state legislative level, and the National League represents cities at the national level and protects cities' interests in any federal legislation.
All right, thanks. She's ready over here, so I don't want to take any more time, but I wanted to float that out there when I got a chance, so if everybody can be thinking about it. We'll have a chance here in a minute, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Also, if anybody's looking for the video from last night, I understand it is posted, just so everybody knows. So, all right, Angela.
Okay, so today we're going to talk a lot about personnel and operations. With the key topics, I'll cover the first four: compensation plan, market adjustments, benefits, and retirement, and then Kim will take over from there. I believe everyone was on this council last year, so we're good to skip over quite a bit of this. We talked a little bit about the compensation study last year, how it works, who we use. We use Mike Swallow at TechNet, so does a lot of the Wasatch Front. And the main reason is because of the Fair Labor Standards Act, which we discussed, and it's mainly that so that we have some kind of organized pay structure that shows if there's male or female, if they're in a certain role and they have the same responsibilities, they have the same work environment, that they're going to be paid the same. So it takes all that into account, make sure that we're in compliance with that. And these are some of the factors involved in that compensation study. The first one shown here is job knowledge. Next one of the factors is difficulty of work, and it also has a small factor in there for work environment, so that there is some benefit to or value in there for those that are having to work in inclement weather and conditions. And all that brings us to the total points of the job valuation, which in turn gives us our pay bands. So our market analysis is a lot of municipalities along the Wasatch Front. Last year we used a much smaller group, but this year we went ahead and branched out. These are all the groups involved in our survey group this year. We included a lot of the sewer districts, improvement districts, water associations, because it gave us more pay bands to work with, more job descriptions, because a lot of cities don't have their own sewer. So that helped there. Here's a survey range versus city average pay. The green dots that you see on there, on the compensation study, I can click on those green dots and it shows exactly what pay band it's talking about. You'll see that none of our positions are over the survey maximum. Quite a few of them are around the midpoint. Most are on that lower side there. So going forward, some of the things that we're looking at, of course, is looking at that curve, trying to put merit and performance and some longevity in there for some of our employees that are higher on the band are because they've been here a long time. Another thing is we want to continue our organizational culture, make sure that all our employees are delivering good customer service to our residents. Number 3 is already done. We've prepared a least cost implementation page that Kimberly actually started the budget process with, making sure that we were able to allocate those numbers for our existing employees based off of that. And last is something that Terrence and I have talked about moving forward into this next year. What we're gonna look at is some other bigger cities out there, go and talk with Lehigh, how they are using Technic as well, but they're a much bigger city, a lot more employees. Right now, our compensation is by each single employee I have listed and attached their pay band. We're getting pretty big to where we're looking at next steps, possibly, but not limited to, the pay step method, which some cities utilize. Now, there's pros and cons to that, but we'll talk with cities that have that implemented and look at if we're ready to go there at this point. Some key considerations: need to pay, of course, always based off of who we hire, how experienced they are. Ability to pay is always the biggest one for us. It comes down to budget and what we can. Willingness to pay, we're always willing, but what does the budget allow? So it really is controlled by number two quite a bit. So what we're proposing this year, last year, I don't know if you remember, we just put that on the side, there was a 3% baseline adjustment, and that was not a COLA, not a market, it was merit based off evaluations. We did started those evaluations with employees. So the most that most of the employees got was 3%. We did then target after that a lot of the ones in the lower pay bands that were under 85% of midpoint. And there was quite a few employees on that lower end that did get significant bumps, which was nice to see. For this year, still our target goal continues to get employees to midpoint within 3 to 5 years. That's really hard when that midpoint keeps moving every year. So we'll see. We're really trying to work on that still. 2.9% is being proposed for a market-driven adjustment. Some employers some employers and municipalities are using either the CPI index or what Social Security got. That one's going off a CPI index. We're also put in there up to 3% of a merit adjustment. And that it would be based off employee evaluations and performance as well. So not all employees would get that, not all employees would get all of that 3%. The target hire rate that we're hiring at is 85 to 90% of midpoint. A lot of those that are being hired, if they don't come in with all the or meet all the qualifications for that job description, for instance, a streets operator, let's just say they don't have a CDL, and that's one of the job requirements. We'll start them at that 85%. Once they do finish that 6-month probation and they've acquired that CDL and they're making good progress, and then we go ahead and give them that 2.9 as well. Because if we don't, they're going to keep falling behind each year. So, and that's why the new hires are eligible for that 2.9. I do have, by the way, a survey. Jenica Jones with Orem City sent out a survey to all municipalities here, and a lot of people have responded, and she was just asking for what we had planned for either market COLA and then merit separate, and what everyone was basing that off of. And these numbers here are in line with what a lot of municipalities are doing. Some use the Social Security rate, which is 2.5. A lot are using the CPI index of 2.9, or just saying a flat 3%. We're doing 2.9 and 3. The highest I saw in there, I think, was 7% on merit. But if you're interested in looking at that, I do have that information, can get it over to you. Okay, going over to the employee benefits, there's not a lot to talk about here because the only one that did change is our medical. And they came back, and I told Kim at the beginning of the year, let's look at, we're looking at 5% to 7.5% increase, and they came back at 10.94, and I was really scared to tell her that. But they ended up coming back a couple weeks later at 7.36, and I told them, we're really trying to focus on our existing personnel this year. This might affect us being able to give those increases that we wanted to. And they came back last week and said they got it down to 4.97. With that being said, we've been with NFP and everything benefits. Before that was First West benefits.
Based on that, let's see what they'll do in another 3 or 4 months.
No, you're good. But we might be going out to RFP. No, it was them. They did reduce their commission in order to get that there. And this has been our history of renewals with Motive Health. I was sad because in 2023 and 2024, we had gone down, which nobody else had, and it was really exciting. So I was hoping for 3 years in a row, and it didn't happen. But it went down to less than half than they originally said, so that was a good thing. We are looking at, like I mentioned, going to RFP for our benefit services towards the end of the year, beginning of next, to make sure that we're keeping that competitive edge. There's a lot of other places out there that are looking for our business as well. Dental did not change. Those rates held, so no increase there. Same with vision. Those were on 2-year rate guarantees. And then life insurance, short-term, long-term disability, all of those are on a 3-year rate guarantee. So hold on those as well. Retirement, with URS, we have preliminary numbers still. They still say preliminary on them, but this is what they're expected to be. There's a decrease of 1% across the board for Tier 1, for Tier 2 hybrid and Tier 2 defined contribution, a reduction of 1%. Now that employee contribution that we talked about last year with that Tier 2 hybrids, where the employee all of a sudden had to start picking up that 0.70 on the employee portion. Last year, the city covered it. We would like to continue to do that same thing, the 0.8, it went to 0.81 this year. There was a Senate Bill 20 to try and help make it easier for cities to do that. It did not pass this year. There was a lot of support from a lot of municipalities, but it didn't pass. So we would continue that through a stipend if we continue that route there. And I think we're on to personnel requests. Oh. Okay.
So I had a question on this one from last year that I've been holding on to, and it might be another one that I've only talked to Rich about. I don't know why you're the guy that I talked to lately.
I'm a sounding board.
Yeah. But for when we did, early in your presentation, you talked about last year's market analysis, specifically when it was council and mayor. The mayor's excluded in this because by code they participate in the other benefits as well. But as I talked to other council members throughout the year, our pay, we kind of picked a medium or whatever through a lot of the surrounding areas. But I don't know if it was on there and I don't remember it, but we didn't have any benefits offered. And a lot of the other cities, they have that pay with benefits. So I don't know if that's ever been talked about or what it was, but I was curious. Because for me personally, and I know that's probably different for other people, I would rather have benefits than pay. And especially if we can get on a group plan like that at a fairly low rate. So another thing that I just wanted to float out to see what our fellow council members thought. We talk about increases all the time, and obviously this is one that's governed by code, but you know, what if you have those numbers, what that is?
For council, we did do that at the time when they were looking at the increases that went into effect beginning of January. That was looked at, and those were all sent over. We did it a couple of times. I remember, I believe the very first person that asked for that was Carolyn. I sent that over to her, and then we had another one done. It's not the same as this study, but we actually called every city that we could find and just got their benefits. And there were a lot of councils that did have the benefits as well. And that was discussed, I remember.
But that wasn't part of
that was
the-
one of the factors involved.
But that wasn't part of the number that was in the pay itself. That wasn't added into the pay.
That was,
So when you're looking at their pay and our pay, that doesn't include the fact that they're also getting benefits. And Lehigh specifically is one that I talked to. If you don't take the benefit, the health insurance, for instance, they actually contribute to a 401k instead.
because we do that the same with employees if they don't. take it.
So anyway, just a thought for council members. The other thing is you mentioned a lot about last year's COLA and the 2.9. Are you proposing anything for this year, or did we not do that yet?
Yes, that wasn't in there. It was the 2.9 and the 3%, up to 3% for the merit.
So I know, just because I got the mic on, I hate to be the one to have to say this, but I've also heard from other council members. I brought it up last year, and I don't know if it's going to be received well, but I don't like percentages, especially when you start getting up into the higher pay scale, because, and I've said this 1,000 times, 3% of 250,000 is a lot more than 3% of 57,000. So to me, that's not a good adjustment, and the higher you get paid, the quicker that becomes hard to sustain. So I just wanted to float out there, and if nobody picks up on my carrot, that's fine, but I don't like the 3% once you hit the upper tier. I'm gonna leave it at that.
I actually agree with that. Mine's gonna be more focused on the lower end rather than the upper end, though, because I feel like, I mean, do the math. 3% of $57,000, does it even buy groceries? And the reality of it is a lot of times we want to look at percentages and we think it's very generous, but if you're the person who's making $57,000 to $80,000, it's not really a lot of money change for the amount of work that they're doing, and I feel like that, yeah, divide that by 12. Get an extra $142 a month. It doesn't even pay for groceries. And I just feel like that we can do better than that. Last year, we gave substantial increases to our upper echelon. That was what the plan that Steve laid out was. We gave significant raises to a number of people that are in that higher pay bracket. And I think that perhaps we need to swing that back the other direction towards the lower end of that and get them up to a cost of living wage for them to be able to make their money. That's my opinion on that, but I think we've talked about that numerous times as a council, that we want to be a place that people aren't looking for another place to work because they can't live on the wage that they're making here. And I would like to see that represented. I feel the same way about just doing a percent across the boards, because I feel like that becomes advantageous on one end and very disadvantageous on the other end.
So last year, it was actually opposite that. There were a few department heads, I believe, that moved up in the scale towards the latter part of the year. But what was proposed was targeting those that were making less than 85% of midpoint, and those were mainly at the ones with at the lower end. That's what we targeted last year.
If I remember right, it was 3% to everybody, and then up to 5% for the lower end, or some.
Yeah, but they got more.
Yeah, or
Yeah.
something there was definitely some targeted stuff at the lower end. I'm saying I don't like the 3% across the board, because it's not the same. For instance, if, for me, and this is just my theory, if I was to figure out what a COLA is, how does the national level, when they talk about COLAs, what basis, genesis are they using? I think, in my mind, they're taking a medium income and figuring out how much things increased for the medium level person. Because I can guarantee you that the cost of living for a $250,000 person isn't 3%. Eggs didn't go up that much, but the cost of living for somebody under the medium income, although eggs did go up, Donna.
Yeah.
They went up a lot. But for somebody under that, 3% is not enough, because our expenses of everyday life is exceeded the $1,500 that we're talking about, or 17, or whatever that number is. So to me, if I took 90,000 and divided that by the 3%, that would be roughly, last year I remember it was about 2,200 was the number in my head. And then said, okay, everybody gets 2,200. That to me makes more sense of staying with what things actually cost at the supermarket, and gas and things, 2,700. Okay, then everybody gets 27. That way a guy at $50,000 gets 2,700, and a guy at $250,000 got 2,700. They went up the same amount that groceries went up, not an arbitrary percentage. And then again, that's just the way I think, and I'm okay with the 2,700 across the board. I'm not okay with 3% for, and that's just me, and I lost that argument last year, and I'm just gonna make it again.
I don't know, do you want a response for that, or we just want to roll? I don't know.
Let everybody give it.
Yeah, Ben, do you have something to add?
Well, I think what we're losing in here is the difference between a COLA and market-driven. Because what we really want to be concerned with is the fact that we want to retain our personnel. And as we're promoting people, one of the concerns that I had heard, you know, in meeting with different folks and whatnot, is are we top-heavy? Where are we at? Where are we going to be in the future? And when I started really taking a look at it, we're only 25% built. The organization that we have today are going to be the leaders that we have tomorrow. And our entire organization is going to continue to grow. But we don't want to lose our personnel that are peeling off that could go to another city where they could make more position to position. And so we do try to stay away from the straight flat percentage amount, and we go with pay bands that are based on the market conditions for that position from city to city. And that's why we go with someone like Mike Swallow, who does the analysis with all cities. So long as we're comparable with our position to position, then we're less likely to lose people.
So let me rephrase what I was saying, because I agree with that. And I think that's kind of, I might have misquoted it because I saw Kimberly shaking her head the wrong way. So I don't know that I had it right. I think there's two different buckets here. And I thought that's how we approved it last year, and I could be wrong because you shook your head the wrong way. But the COLA part of it, or the everybody part of it, should be what I said, the 2,700. Then the merit-based or market-driven should be a separate bucket that I thought we set aside like 5 to 7% for, and at that time, Steve's not even here, is he?
He's both he and Finn are on virtual.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm here.
Steve, I thought we gave you and the mayor specific direction to use that other bucket to stay with the market and to make sure that we were, at least that's how I remembered it. So I agree that we need to address that through another bucket of where we gotta be. And it's not a percentage, it's this person needs 5, 6, 7, 8 grand, whatever. But if we're gonna also do a merit-based, what I'm gonna call a COLA, just to keep up with the market, I think it should be if it's for everybody,
Okay.
it should be based on the 2,700. Does that separate that for you a little better?
Well, can I just clarify? So merit-based and COLA, I see those as two different things. So I see the merit-based as part of the standard we set, whatever that is, right? So people are going to be at different brackets or payroll numbers based on policy that we've set, depending upon the job they do, the merit, and whatever other factors are involved there. As I see the COLA concept is merely just keeping everybody to what we agreed to, really, even though the numbers move because of inflation, right? So that's the way I think of those two separately.
So I'm gonna change the word from COLA to market adjustment, because that's what it's called here. The 3% market adjustment should be the same $2,700 across the board. That's what I'm saying. Because,
There's two things.
turn your mic on, sorry.
There's two things. COLA brings the entire range up, meaning that inflation took place, you have the same spending power as you had last year because the inflation, that brings the whole range up. What we're talking about merit is taking you through your range. And if we don't take people through their range, they're always going to be falling behind at the, 85, or it'll start at 90, go down to 85 and 80 and whatnot. So it's through the range. So there's two different things that we're looking at.
So let me ask this question, and the 2.9% is based on what?
We use the CPI, so the Consumer Price Index is what we used. Some people use Social Security and what Social Security went up by, which was 2.5.
A flat rate across the board, this is what everybody's getting, it's not gonna be based on their salary. That's what
Based
Jared
off their
is
salary,
talking.
yes.
That's the point that he's making
Yes.
there is 2.9% for somebody making $120,000 is not a cost of living increase.
But that is,
Groceries aren't more expensive for somebody who makes 120,000 than somebody who makes 57,000. It's the same amount.
correct. It's just bringing them up for what they were getting last year, what they're getting this year, and increasing what went up in goods and services and stuff as well. So keeping them where they're at and then
I
adding
think we
the 3%.
understand that. I
Yeah.
think that we're saying we don't agree with the percent based on salary. That if we're talking about a cost of living, it should probably be the same across the board, and then the merit increase should be based on what they've done based on their salary.
So there was one entity, I believe it was Sevier County, who did it a little differently. Everyone else is doing a percentage in merit, COLA, market COLA, or, and then the merit separate. But they did it differently, and I noticed on there, they did $1.50 across the board for the market COLA. But that was the only one I saw on there. But I think that speaks a little bit more to what Jared was talking about. And then to speak to the separate bucket, you're right, there was that separate bucket for the other employees last year. And that went to, we had said 5 to 7%, but because a lot of them were at the lower part of the band, some employees on those lower bands were actually given 15 to 17% increase to get those. And those were the ones that we targeted last year.
And I really appreciate that, and I do understand what Jared is saying, and I think what he's trying to do is make it seem fair, and I totally get that. My issue, though, is all the others, just because all the other cities are doing it doesn't mean we should, but all of industry typically does this as well, and so basically we're giving pay cuts to our people that make more. So that's the question you have to ask yourself. Are you willing to give them a pay cut knowing that they could find a job at Lehigh or Saratoga Springs where they're getting the raise?
So can we go back and look at just the midline graph that you have? Can you pull that up for us, please? Because when I look at that, I mean, if I'm seeing this correctly, the kind of the light blue is Eagle Mountain, right? And you can see that on the lower end of the pay scale, below, when I say lower end, below 160 now. I'm not sure that, I mean, below 160, it looks like the bulk of our employees find themselves. I mean, there's a few under that are over that line, but the midline, a lot of our employees are finding themselves below that, even in the upper range. When you look at these dots at the 200 and the 170, whatever that is, and 3 at 140, I hear what you're saying, Councilmember Gray, and I hear what Councilmember Wood are saying, but I tend to find myself a little more in Councilmember Burnham's camp, in that what I don't want to see is our employees going backwards, but I think there needs to be perhaps a greater emphasis on employees who are in the lower portion of our pay band, but I don't think that needs to be exacted through whether you call it a COLA or whatever. I don't think it should be exacted through the COLA. I think that's where what they did last year is what we should try and tackle this year. 2.9% cost of living increase, whether you make $50,000 or $125 or $250 is 2.9%. It's more if you make more money. I get that, and I understand that argument. My argument would be, can we take that excess that's over and above that 2.9%, so the remaining 3% that's being proposed, and make sure that it's disproportionately allocated to those employees who are down in this lower pay band. That's kind of what I'm seeing as a target. You guys can disagree with me, and that's fine, but that's kind of where I'm landing. It looks like Councilmember Clark.
I think that we're looking at 3 different types of increases. One is COLA, which is just industry standard to adjust to cost of living. That's what that one is. Then there's merit pay, which is self-explanatory. And then there's getting all of our employees into that mid-range. And we set that as a goal, as a body, and we work toward it with the last budget. And I think we need to continue to work toward that with this year's budget. But I don't think that work should be impacting COLA or merit, that we just need to set aside a certain chunk of money to work toward that. So I don't want us to do it at the peril of the COLA, because it's true, if we don't give that across the board, then it is like giving a pay cut to those. But I am very sensitive to what you guys are saying about making sure that those that are below that certain level of income are brought more in line with at least what that midpoint is.
Because what happens is this, I'm looking to hire some welders in my business, and what I'm finding is I'm having to bring people in and pay them more than some of my existing staff. And so everything gets flipped around and it makes it very difficult. And suddenly I have a guy that's been with me a while that's making less than the guy who I'm just bringing in the front door. That doesn't work, it's not the way it should work. And so I'm wrestling with that in my personal business right now.
Yeah, that's the equity that we're trying to resolve.
So I'm going to change a little different example, even though I know I'm outnumbered, and I'll let it rest. And I'm going to use a couple positions, even though we have those positions, I'm not targeting the person, because it's the easiest way to understand this. Engineers, attorneys, and I'm even going to say administrators it's not based on the market. It's based on the experience. I have some attorneys that I pay $450 an hour, and I have some that charge me $900 an hour. Why? Well, not because one's better than the next one, it's because that's what he commands. And if you want that guy, that's what he's going to get. Now, I'm going to change that because we specifically went through this prior to your hiring. There were some administrators that we could have hired around $105,000. Now, are they merit-based below the curve? It's their experience. That's what they were worth. And it's because the position and their experience and their knowledge, and we chose to wait off and pick the guy we picked and pay a little bit more than $105,000 because we were targeting a certain skill set. So I'm separating that out to say that sure, our general employees that drive a truck and shovel snow and whatever, we need to work on that. But there are positions like engineers, attorneys that are paid based on their knowledge and the commanding rate, and it has nothing to do with this. That's where I get hung up on the 2.9%. They may or may not be what the market shows because it's based on their specific skill set. So 3%, and that's where I come back and say 3% of 180,000, well, they're at 180,000 because that's what they commanded. And 3% is a lot of money on that compared to the other guys. So I lost that argument, but I wanted you to understand where I was coming from.
Another thing I wanted to mention, I went through and looked at the very bottom, the last value pay band on our study, and I looked at how it changed over this last year. That one alone went up by 4.5%, but as you get more towards the middle of the bands, because of what you were talking about exactly with experience and knowledge and that, institutional knowledge that we want our employees to have, that went median, going up to the median of the compensation study, those had gone up already 6.5 to 7%. And it's just because you're looking for those qualified applicants. So that's why it moves a little bit more as you get to the top, because those are harder to come by.
Ultimately, people leave for two reasons. They're pulled or pushed. Anybody, no matter where you're at. And the pull is what we're trying to mitigate so that we can remain competitive and whatnot. We have so many great things that retain people here. The push is creating a great working environment. And I think our Sunshine Committee and everything that Angela's doing and that keeps people here.
Wait, we have a Sunshine Committee?
We do, yeah.
I don't know about
Keeps
the
morale
Sunshine
up, and
Committee.
We have great opportunities, great projects, exciting things to cut your teeth on and whatnot. So we're growing our leaders for the future. That's the push that we're getting rid of by having great opportunities. It's the pull that we're trying to mitigate in this process.
I'm going to make one more comment, even though I said I wouldn't, because I did this last year. Look, because I'm passionate about this, and I did it last year, and I look like a big old fat jerk by saying this, especially to our senior staff.
You're not that fat.
Yeah, well, getting fatter by the day. I'm still a jerk.
All right, I couldn't resist. You just walked right into that. And I
didn't say you weren't a jerk, though.
That's my point. Fair enough.
Sorry, I apologize, but I just couldn't resist.
I love it. I deserve that. But I want to say this because I've harped on this one. There's nothing I appreciate more than our senior staff, and I wish I could pay them 20% more than they're making. I really wish that. But I in expressing my desire to bring up the bottom and equalize the playing field, it looks like it's at the head of our senior staff, and so I want to make sure and get that out there that engineers and attorneys and are still well loved and everything else. I just want to make sure that you know, in my efforts to do what I do, I've explained, but I do want to make sure the staff knows how much we appreciate them, the work they do, and I can't say enough about that.
Maintain the COLA, it's 29% over 10 years. I'll just say that. So it is going to be 20%, Jared, in time.
That's actually a really good lead-in because it leads us to our next discussion, because we do have constraints, right? And when you look at all of the needs that we have, we only have so many dollars to make it go forward, and that's all based on the ability to be able to raise revenue and your comfort level in doing so to be able to meet these needs. And so, what a great opportunity to transition over to Kimberly.
Are we in the triple digit request for personnel yet this year?
Yes, 38, I think, right?
I do want to report too that the Sunshine Committee is actually funded by employee contributions. So it's a really neat program that goes out there to recognize and support the staff. It's pretty fun, so.
Send me a link, I'll make a contribution.
It's a payroll deduction. You can fill out a form with Angela anytime.
Done, Angela. I want to be part of the sunshine.
Yes. Okay, well, Mayor and Council, again, this is one of my favorite budget work meetings that we do because we start to get into just some of the nitty-gritty, the nuts and bolts of the items that we're bringing forward with the upcoming budget. So we're going to spend a little bit of time. We're going to run through these worksheets so that we just have time to kind of address everything, but then we want to spend as much time as necessary to go through any questions, to be able to talk about any of the specifics as well. So again, the pictures aren't the most important part of this. It's what you guys have to say and your thoughts that you'll contribute, so thank you. Okay. As was mentioned, we're going to go through a couple of slides, but we are over 30 in terms of our numbers of requested personnel this year. So with that, as we kind of go through, the way that these slides are is we did start to group them simply by the fund because the resources, right, in terms of how we pay for them is a big factor that comes into play as well. And if we were able to identify an individual funding source for some of these positions outside of just general tax dollars and so forth, what we were looking at. As we put our draft budget together with the general fund, one of the things, again, that this year is that we did continue to grow so much in fiscal year 2025, and with the 5 amendments that we've done, last fiscal year, I believe we approved 11, like for the beginning of this year, we approved 11 positions, and since July, we've added an additional 10. So there's a lot of costs that we have had to absorb in this particular year, and as a result of that, it does chew up some of the growth that we would normally have to go forward into the next year's budget. Here's, I'm going to just kind of flip through a few of these in terms of what we have for the positions, and they're not really grouped by, they're not grouped by division or function at that point. They are kind of grouped between, is there a resource that we can use to fund them, and then kind of looking at them from like a tier 1, tier 2, and to try to be able to rank some things if we were, as things come along and we have to start making actual decisions. So these requests do include all of the requests that have come forward at this time, and that the committee has not made recommendations yet in terms of positions that we would continue to pulse through with the tentative budget at this time. All that is still under review. Okay, so again, as we continue on within the general fund here, we have a number of additional items coming from administration, a lot of open space and parks type items that were coming as we saw a lot of the challenges with the city and citizen initiatives and coming forth about just the space that we have to maintain here as a community and the added acreage that we have. There is a total of 4 requests from the sheriff's officers, so we have placed them. We had 2 kind of in that upper tier, and then we've had 2 down here as the secondary tier on the request. The special revenue fund, which includes our housing, it's not a housing authority, it's just it's where we have, it's a new fund that was created for our housing programs. We currently have the mortgage assistance program as we fund out of that. Also, the homeless shelter contribution, all of those dollars are coming from affordable housing dollars that are collected through the RDA projects. Now, with that, we've had a number of plans for moderate housing and additional things that the council would like to see brought forward. And we are recommending that we have a coordinator for these programs that will come forth within the city, and that it would be funded with those resources from the RDAs to be able to cover those. And then within our enterprise funds, we are asking for 2 additional sewer employees and 3 additional water employees. And within our enterprise funds, again, these would also include a rate increase to be able to support them. Okay. On our sheriff's department, so their initial request that they have here is for 4 officers. They're all classified as deputies, but they're looking for them in terms of basically 2 patrol-type deputies, the school resource officer for the new middle school, and then an animal control officer for that. Currently, we actually have 33 sworn officers and 2.5 FTEs from a civilian standpoint, but 2 of those patrol officers that are part of the January forward hirings, those ones have not been hired on board just yet, so those aren't included yet. We do have roughly, the 271,000 that would be related to kind of some of those base cost increase. But overall, just the budget increase that we're absorbing in the budget in preparation for 2026 would be about $672,000 that we're just picking that up with where we are. And again, that's related to the new hires where we only hired for half a year. You're picking up your additional costs as well as the contract increase price that will be there. And then
Kimberly, can I ask you a question real quickly, just about the animal control officer? I know in other cities, they tend to split that responsibility. They have that plus some other responsibility, but they're not a law enforcement officer. What is the intent with this one? Do you know?
The intent of this is that it is a sworn officer.
Okay.
So typically, they do have them as a patrol officer, but their side duties are for animal control. So if they have dispatch that comes through on animal-related issues, they're the ones that are called for those.
So there's basically 3 deputies, one that'll have other responsibilities.
Yes.
Okay.
And the school resource officers work that same way too, in terms of when it's summertime and school's not in place. They're all basically full board sworn officers and can be moved to any patrol positions within the organization there that they have. Okay, so the way that the contract does work is by May 1st, the county has to give us their new cost per employee. Again, those cost estimates are around 4%, but it's not necessarily fixed at that cost. And then overtime is generally around 7%. If the overtime cost is going to exceed that, they have to get permission from us first on those overtime costs. So when I put the budget together, I look at when they do their monthly invoices, there's actually a cost per type of employee that it is, and it's just 12 months going forward. And then the only variable each month is actually the overtime costs, and then the benefits associated with those overtime costs. But when we do the budgeting, then we do plan for that 7% so that we're accounting for it when that were to come up. So with a deputy position, though, that cost is about just under $200,000 per officer. That includes their wages, their benefits to equip them with all of their equipment and gear, as well as their vehicle costs. That is basically the flat rate. So right now we have, I can't see that number. So
Does that include the overtime cost? Is that part of that calculation?
So the overtime cost is, so like again for next year, so that flat where I've got fiscal year 2026, the estimated contract, so that $7 million is basically what it cost us for 33 sworn officers and 2.5 civilians, with our 4% factored in, and then an additional about $500,000, which would be the 7% for the overtime estimate. Okay, so the guaranteed outflow is the 7.6 or the 7,062,000 roughly again, and then the overtime is the variable, but we would be, on average, it generally is close to that 7% that's there. So if we were to fund all 4 positions, that's an additional $800,000 to the budget for that. And to put it into perspective with our general fund budget as we're come together with our preliminary numbers in our draft, once we factored in, again, if we were to move forward with the salary proposal that's there, the benefit cost increase that's been proposed, it leaves us about $668,000 in the general fund for all additional requests, including personnel, and then looking at all of our one-time equipment and officers and everything. So we are looking at really tight numbers, which is why we were looking to identify areas where we might be able to fund those. And that will be something that we'll talk about too as we go on. Again, is the council's appetite to look at fees, if fees are what are providing those services and are what support those particular divisions, if there's an appetite to look at increases for that, as well as some of the others that we've talked about so far. Okay, so with the rate scenarios, if you have any questions as this comes along, but I'm actually going to have Terrence jump up here and trade over. So what we asked him to put together for us was, particularly with our enterprise funds, as we were looking at that, as you know, we've already talked about what is the expected rate increases to just continue on as is. And we had him run some just rough scenarios that would say, these are what the rate increases would need to be if we were trying to support additional personnel and the proposed budgets that are being brought forth at this time. So.
So, Mayor and Council, as you know, every time we review the budget development, we also look at our rates so that we make sure that whatever is the rates are reflective of the costs of providing the service that we have. So we run some scenarios based on the personal request, just to provide to council some information as you evaluate your decisions on it. So the first one is, as you can see, is the water rate scenario. And just a caveat, these are all rough numbers. It will all depend based on the water consumption that we have, the number of meter connections, and of course the water fund balance. But as you know, when we reviewed the rates before, we originally planned for a 12%. This next fiscal year will be our third year of 12% for the consumption rate. And actually, we're planning to adjust the base rate to $26.50. The current one is $25.50. And there's a couple of graphs that you can see there. The yellow one in the middle is just based on the departmental budget requests that we receive for the water department. We just look at our rates of how much we need to make sure that the rates will pay for the cost of service for the water department. Instead of $26.50, we're probably looking at about $27 for the base rate. And we're suggesting that we can keep the consumption rate because the requests that we receive we put it on the base rate since it's considered like a fixed cost. So based on that baseline budget that the water department has, including the personal requests that they have, we probably need to tweak our base rate to $28, and then consumption rate still 12%. And then just to give you some comparison of our volume rate, so we're still below. Our consumption rate is still within the low in comparison to the other cities. As you know, it's really hard to compare cities because they have different costs, they have different structures and stuff, but we just want to have some preliminary comparison for the council. And then looking at the baseline budget, from that $26.50 with the proposal of just meeting the baseline budget to $27, that's how our base rate in comparison to the other cities, especially the cities around us. And we're still that eggshell or the white one, that's the average base rate. And then if you decide to do the baseline budget and approve the personal requests, we're still in that middle in comparison to the other cities. So we're still doing good in terms of consumption and base rate comparison. The next one is just the sewer rate. It's just the same thing. We just evaluated what's the department budget request for the sewer. And then based on our analysis that we did last time, that the council is okay with approving about 2.5% increase on the base and the consumption rate. So currently we're paying $34.72 for this fiscal year. The consumption is about $4.15, but with upcoming 2026, that's the proposed plan that is included in the last year's sewer rate study. So from $35.59, if we're just looking at the baseline budget request, we're looking at about $38 and $38.35 for base. And then if you approve the personal request, that could go up to $39.22. And then for the consumption, it's from $4.63, it could go up to $5.04 to $5.15. This is how we, in comparison to the other cities, I included TSSD cities and some cities nearby. As you know, we're just behind. For the base rate comparison, just looking at the new baseline budget, we're gonna be behind Santa Cruz. And then for the volume rate, we are behind Cedar Hills, Saratoga, and Vineyard.
Are all of the ones on these two charts both base and volume like us?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And then if you're considering approving the personal requests, we're looking at this comparison. Same thing, we're just behind Santa Cruz for base rate, but for the volume rate, we're behind Cedar Hills, Saratoga, and Vineyard. Lastly, just the stormwater. Last fiscal year, or this current fiscal year, we made a tremendous changes in this division. We added new personnel to this division as well. We didn't plan on adjusting the 825 ERU. We just changed how we calculated that ERU calculation. But based on that study that we did at the time, I just planned like if we increase it to 5% every year. So from 825, this is just a proposal. It could go up to 8.66. But looking at the budget request of the Stormwater Department, it could potentially increase to about $9.82. And then there is, if there's a personal request, it can go up to $10.44. And this is how we are in comparison to other cities as well. I think those are all the scenarios that I have, so I'll give the time to Kimberly.
Has anyone calculated what it is going to be if all three of those increases are applied, both without the personnel request and then also with the personnel request per month, just so we know the aggregate of what it's going
Yeah.
up?
We have not done that at this point.
Okay.
In terms of that collectively. So, again, they're preliminary numbers to start some conversation about our funding resources and what those are. I do think that it's important that one of the things that we do look at is our comparative to other cities. But I do also think that it's important for us to remember what is different about Eagle Mountain City compared to other cities as well. And when we talk about the number of miles of pipe and roads and things that exist within our community where there's not infill yet. We have lots of areas that we maintain services, but you don't have a ratepayer contributing to those. And some of those are what leads us to having some higher costs. And again, we're still within the pack. There's nothing there that says otherwise. And again, doing a comparison is good to do a check to see where you're at with what you're doing. But unless we were to, again, do more research for that, it's something that you don't want to, it shouldn't be the basis of any of your decisions that you make, is simply how you compare to another community and what they're doing. Because each community will have their own unique needs that they have there as well. So, let's see if I'm going, okay. One-time requests, so when we look at our one-time requests, again, these are typical items where we're not necessarily expecting them to be covered from operating revenues within the year. If the operating revenues can support that, of course, then that is where that takes place. But these would be, again, requests where we're looking at using fund balance if you're within the general fund, reserves if you're within other division reserves from that particular standpoint that we have. And then one of the items that we had talked about too, particularly just as the committee, as we've reviewed all of these, so when we come to these budget meetings with the council, we do want the council to be aware of every request that comes forth in terms of what is being requested and recommended. And then to be able to give an opportunity for you to provide feedback if you have questions or want to know about these requests as they're being reviewed, so that we can discuss that prior to bringing forward any of the tentative budget. For the general fund right now, with the increases that we have done in this year's budget amendment, we're not quite at the 35% of our fund balance. Let me think really quick. I wrote a bunch of those numbers down. But overall, we have about $10.7 million, $10.8 million is where we're sitting with our fund balance within the general fund. And if we were to look at 35% as a maximum for the requested budget, I believe it's about 11 million. I believe it's about $1 million more dollars from that.
Kimberly, can we go back a couple slides? I want to ask about the Eagle on the rock repair.
Yes.
Can somebody give us a breakdown of what we're doing there and why?
The Eagle on the rock repair at this point is an estimate for that if we were to maintain that icon that's there, whether it might be to put in a fabricated rock or something to that. If it were to be redesigned, essentially it has to come down just because of erosion, and it can't stay there. And I don't know if maybe the mayor maybe wants to be able to provide some additional input on that. But it is to recreate kind of that entryway that's coming in off of Eagle Mountain Boulevard and get that restored.
I asked the question because I look at that and go, $50,000 is a lot of money to replace a rock. With the Eagle, I think that, I mean, me personally, I'm not looking to change that. That's a historical landmark for us. But that's the first time I've seen anything about that. I just wondered what it was.
Yeah, if we don't take it down, it will likely fall down, probably sooner rather than later. And so I think the Eagle falling down would be probably not a good look for us. So I'd rather take it down than have it fall down. And then the question becomes, yeah, what do we do with it? It does have history. It would be nice to find a way to have it restored in a manner that won't fall over.
Is the metal part denigrating, or are we just talking about the
The
stone?
rock.
The rock.
It's
Was
the
it
rock.
drilled into it? Is that what it was?
Mhm.
So Just so the council's aware, on that one, we are working to get two different estimates on two different ways we could move forward with that. And although we put a number in this because we are going through the budget process, it's highly likely that we could find funding in this budget year from other sources and be able to do it within our operating budget this year. So that one might come out, but we are looking at different options right now.
Councilmember Wood, I'll just share a couple thoughts. I've talked with Brad a little bit about this. It is falling apart. That rock is split. Big chunks of it are falling off. It's just a matter of time before the Eagle won't be landed. It will be planted somewhere, and maybe in someone's windshield. So I think there's some concern about that. So I understand at least the desire to do that. I think that's a pretty healthy budget. From my perspective, that's something that my company would do, but because of my conflict of interest, I wouldn't be interested in that. But certainly I'm going to help evaluate that as we look at that. And I think it could be done significantly cheaper than that and repaired in a way that that's meaningful, that maintains the integrity of the piece and allows it to remain as a monument and a landmark in Eagle Mountain.
I don't know, any chance we can do like a volunteer work party out there? Maybe, I don't know.
I already said I'll bring my excavator out and pull the thing down, but staff just, they kind of kiboshed that idea.
I'm not opposed to getting a bid, and then you just have to exclude yourself from voting on it. You could probably do a better job than, I mean, I don't think you should remove yourself, is what I'm getting at. It's,
He can't profit from working here.
But I can certainly evaluate whatever proposal comes forward and help you understand where I think we could trim some fat and make some adjustments and perhaps bring some of it in-house.
That would be super helpful. And it's just, we tell everyone, it's a city center thing, turn at the Eagle, you know? So we've got to have the Eagle or no one's going to know where to turn.
Thanks for the clarity.
I wrote down a lot of questions too. I don't know if we're done yet or if we're moving on.
We just have this one other slide to be able to hit, and then we'll kind of open up to discussion. We'll go back to some of the prior slides and to be able to dig into that. So one of the other items that we've continued to kind of talk about, but wanted to bring forth a few numbers and to put it into context as, again, we're looking at this, is the RAP tax discussion, right? So RAP tax in terms of a funding source is something that would require like voter approval. If the voters were interested in it, it was something that they wanted to be able to see, to be able to provide some estimates that roughly, you know, just under $600,000 is what we would have generated this last year from RAP tax. From a citizen standpoint, it's not necessarily an increased tax to them, because if they're shopping anywhere in the region, there's already a RAP tax levied in all the other cities. It's just that that tax they're paying is going to fund programs within those individual communities. So shopping in Eagle Mountain here, if you were shopping here, again, that would be a point of sale resource to us that would bring some funding available to be able to help participate with some of our open space needs, our parks services, and again, just those, if it was looking at advanced programming that the city wanted to see, but anything along that recreation, arts, and parks standpoint, it is an area of resource that's available out there if we think that the citizens might have an appetite for it, and then we're willing to just see if it's something that they're interested in or not.
It's probably important to note there too that this 593,000 was last year. If it does not take into account if, you know, when we have Walmart open up, but also too, Evan did some analysis on this, and it does apply to the MET, is that right? And so as MET continues to grow, it is also a tax on that as well. So you'll see a greater investment into our parks, trails, and other venues that could increase the quality of life within our community if it's something that the voters voted for.
And sorry, I want to just make one other clarification, but typically on energy, there is a sales tax and a municipal energy tax, and they're two separate taxes. So I'm assuming this will be applicable on the sales tax side and not necessarily the municipal energy tax portion. Just
Thank you for the clarification.
That does have
Yeah.
a statutory cap. It's the 6%, which is currently levied. So
Thank you.
Is that year over year, Kimberly? It generates that every year? Or does that increase every year?
Which,
The 593,755, the wrap tax?
oh, so it would be, yeah, because it's based on your sales. It's based on, it's a tax, so a 0.1% of sales, taxable sales. Within, yes, it is based off a point of sale. So it would be within our community, or if they're buying online and their final delivery destination is Eagle Mountain City, then that would also
And
apply.
that would include the municipal energy tax as
So
well.
it's not the municipal energy tax, it's sales tax
tax,
on,
okay.
on your electric bill. So if you actually pulled your electric bill, you're gonna see several taxes. One is a sales tax, and it would be that portion of the tax rate would increase. So,
So this is a really good question for the council. Is this something that the council's interested in moving forward with and having us pursue as far as getting it on the ballot this year? It would require quite a large community engagement process, but where other neighboring cities have gone through it recently, it's on the forefront of people's minds. And truly, we are building and constructing the parks in other communities with our local dollars. Is there an opportunity for us to keep those local dollars here?
Does the wrap tax have to be voted on during a municipal election year, or can it be added as an election item on a ballot during a non-municipal election year?
I believe it can be voted on either. I'm just double checking here real fast.
While you're checking that, there was another question that somebody else posed was, can it be on or it was actually Tyler, does it need to be on our municipal election, our general election, or can it be on a primary election? And I didn't have an answer to that.
So the answer is election shall be held at a regular general election or a municipal general election. So it would not be a primary, but it could be either.
So, any November.
So I'm gonna give a controversial answer to this. I feel like, I like it, by the way, I think it's a good portion of money, but I feel like we're gonna get beat up pretty hard about this when we haven't solved some of the issues we've been beat up about with these very specific things. So for me to be interested in doing something like that, I think we need to be able to show the public a plan to address the issues that they see along our parkways with the space that belongs to the city that's not necessarily a park, and how we're taking care of those, and finishing the parks that are unfinished. Now, we can make the argument and say, well, that amount of money is for that, but I think that they need to know that there's a plan in place, rather than just we're gonna tax them.
I don't disagree with that, actually. I think that's a really good insight. One of my hesitations whenever it comes to taxes like this is that things like the recreation, arts, and parks are often seen as like the extras or the things that we can do when the revenue's there. But when we create a specific revenue source for those things, it ends up feeling like it's the tail wagging the dog sometimes. Like, well, we have all this revenue, so now we need to pay for all of these other things. And the irony of this discussion is like these funds could go to pay for the Eagle Monument. So like, I get it on just a financial level, and I can see that this body could probably handle it well. But the reality of it is once you create a RAP, it's there pretty much indefinitely. I don't know that there's a whole lot of municipalities that repeal a RAP. And
It's for 10 years.
yeah,
It has to be voted on every 10 years.
and by the public?
Yes.
With that, can we give specific instructions to how it's used as part of a code or
So-
resolution?
What happens is you would form a RAP tax committee. You would, kind of like a planning commission type of thing, you would have people appointed to that. There would be recommendations coming from our parks and open spaces and whatnot. Also, there could be 501c3s that are putting in and requests and whatnot. That RAP tax committee puts their recommendations together, and then that is brought forth to the council, and the council is the ultimate body that votes on how those dollars are spent. You can accumulate them for several years. I know Payson City, when they first put it in, they didn't have any pickleball courts. They saved it for 2 or 3 years and then put their first pickleball court complex in. It just, each city's unique in how they go about utilizing them.
So is the framework set by this board that is created, or is the framework set by the council, and then they take that framework and go come up with some solutions to whatever they want to do?
The framework and the criteria is set by the council, and you create the board to help filter and give you recommendations, and then you ultimately vote on what they recommend. You can make tweaks to it at that time. And again, you are not raising their taxes. You are getting this as an opportunity for the voters to decide if they would like to use those dollars here locally and improve their quality of life. Because in all reality, our academic base is going to continue to grow, but it is rather small for a city of 73,000. And a lot of our dollars are being spent improving the parks for our neighbors. And so whether it's all of Salt Lake, which did it at the county level, or each individual municipality at the Utah County, we all have to go through this pain and process of doing it on our own. The reality is those dollars are making us less competitive to our neighbors in the quality of life offerings that could bring people in.
One thing, based off of what Councilmember Wood said, I guess for me, if we were to put this out to the people, one, I do think we should have a plan of how we're gonna address certain things and kind of a timeline of that. But additionally, I think that framework should be discussed so that when the residents are voting on this, even though that won't show up on the ballot as part of the public information side of it, they understand the plan and what we're putting out there, not just a blanket, here's this percentage tax that we're asking for. So that it's both a plan to accomplish the things that we need to accomplish and how we're going to use the money if we raise it this way.
So what I'm hearing you say, Councilmember Clark, and I tend to agree with it, is if we're going to put this on as a ballot question, that the only way I'm gonna find a level of comfort in that is going to be that we've already done the marketing and the work prior to that just landing in front of the citizens so that they understand what this is about, rather than they're just looking at it and going, another tax, no thank you.
Mostly what you said, but I would say the marketing comes well after we've had the deliberative process of how we're going to do it. Because to me, sometimes I feel like we jump the gun on the marketing of something when it should be a public notice of, hey, we're gonna have a discussion about this, not, we've devised this amazing plan, come yell at us. So I think we need to have the deliberative process before the marketing comes.
So what I'm hearing you say is it needs to come to a work session in our next council meeting if there's a willingness to consider this.
Yeah, and I guess what all of us need to decide is, do we want this to come to a work session? Because if this isn't a 2025 ballot question, then we can save it for next year. That's the question we have to decide. That's what they're asking us.
It's hard, I think it's hard to say that without an idea of what we want this to be. I'm not really interested in having it be open-ended and have people fighting for their pennies on it. I think it'd be better for us to give a clear outline to the citizens of how this can benefit and help some of the issues that we need to solve before we start getting into the wants. I'd like to see this more as a need first and want later.
So I think what I hear you saying is you're willing to look at RAP, but you want to know if we could have a framework to take care of the needs with it as opposed to the extras when we first put it out there?
And you see what Kimberly brought up, and I think this is really important because RAP-dependent positions, an arborist, a library clerk too, open space working lead, I mean, those are the things that could be funded, which I think are missing services that our community could benefit from, but we don't have the resources to be able to fund it without this help. That's what I'm at least sensing here.
So I just want to create a little bit of caution. Right now, we take dollars from the general fund to put towards capital projects, improvements, trails, all that type of thing. We also put dollars towards positions. When it comes to creating new positions, utilizing RAP tax, I'm a little bit more concerned because you want to make sure it's one-time dollars that are going towards one-time projects. But what that does is it frees up general fund dollars to be used towards personnel elsewhere. So instead of diverting.
So if we're already funding it from our general fund, what it does is leaves those dollars in the general fund and lets us allocate the RAP tax dollars to those ongoing costs.
Exactly, because if you were to look at just our general fund increases today, compared to just our law enforcement needs today, we're barely making that equate and not adding any of these other positions that could make our quality of life better.
I think that a key component of considering a rehab tax on a ballot is helping residents understand that. Because I don't want to say, well, this will help us fund these positions that are sorely needed within our organization, but then also say, except for that money can't be used for that because it's one time. Like, I think we need to do a really competent job of explaining how these dollars will make a difference when we look at lists like this.
They free up general fund dollars, right? I mean, they free up general fund dollars. That's what they do.
It could, and then Kimberly, if you could go to maybe to the capital project ones, the one-time expenditures from the general fund that are related to quality of life, like the trail improvements, the anyway, a lot of those we may not be able to fund because we just don't have general fund dollars this year to be able to do that because we haven't had the growth yet. And yet we could fund some of these projects with RAP tax dollars.
I think it would be a really difficult sell for residents to say that it was positions, especially when we talked to them about how we were going to solve our open space. And we told them we were going to hire part-time people, and now that's dependent on the RAP tax. That's
So-
upsetting to me.
Exactly, and we're just, maybe the word dependent is the wrong word there, but what we're really saying is we're constrained in our general fund. That's where our most difficult area is to try to fund going forward. Now, some of that's going to be resolved when we see the data centers coming forward and whatnot, but we're in that period where expectations and wishes and desires are much greater than our ability to actually pay. And so when we look at things like the, yeah, a lot of the pavement, the Wi-Fi in our parks, golf improvements, outdoor Christmas tree, there's a lot of amenities within our community that we could pursue, but we're going to be constrained. And ultimately, you can set the tone on what you want those to be. Our Trails Network, we advertise a wonderful Trails Network, but we do have concerns that a lot of those trails are on private property. We have a lot of work to do to improve those trails, to get easements for those trails, to clean up that whole thing. Open space is another. So I don't want to advocate so much as to say this is a true revenue source that other cities are using that we aren't, and our residents are benefiting because they don't pay that dime when they're buying locally, but they're also suffering because they're paying it to Saratoga and others.
So while we're on this page, I'll start here. And maybe, I'm going to start with this question that maybe Steve knows or Ben can answer. How far are we from a new city hall?
So we plan on actually bringing that to the council during your next work session. We haven't gone through the agenda setting yet, so we're not sure how much time is available in the next work session. But our desire to get a RFP and an architect on board is really dependent on some of the council expectations. And so we wanted to have a healthy discussion with you on how tall is it, how big is it, what's it going to look like, all that kind of thing, so we can kind of get your ideas before setting an RFP out.
If we're going to throw a dart, I know it takes 3 years to build a high school, roughly, architectural, stuff like that. If we were to say, okay, we finally got some ground purchased, we got to get the architectural stuff, we got to kick the can for a little while with council because that's what we do, and then we're going to stick shovels in the ground and start building. Are we 2 years away? Are we 18 months away?
It all comes down to a balance between expectations and our ability to pay. And so if the council has reasonable expectations and our ability to pay is right there, and now we have the ground and we get architectural plans together and we have an ability to pay, that's great. If we have delusions of grandeur, then that could
We
make
do.
it,
Did you say?
then that could make it more challenging, and we have to be more creative in how we try to make those things work.
So, how long? What are?
3 to 5 years before your occupancy, yeah.
If this is coming to a work session anytime soon, can we also include, partly for the benefit of the council, but mostly for the benefit of the residents of our community, the number of employees we have that are unhoused or don't have like true workplaces to work? Because I think some of the narrative that's being spread right now is they're gonna build this palace and we don't need this and da-da-da, like all of those pieces. But the question that keeps coming up is like, we have employees that don't have a place to go to work every day. So, and we're asking for 30-something more. I wanna make sure that we're demonstrating why we as a council know that there's a need for City Hall with actual numbers to be able to share with the public.
Okay, so I asked that question, get to this one. I said the last 6 times we've remodeled City Hall, and I'm gonna talk about the kitchen, that I don't wanna spend another penny on this building because I want it to go to the next one. So tell me why I'm wrong.
So what I mentioned when we, in one of my reports, was we wanted to bring all requests to you unvarnished. So we didn't want to take anything from any department head and not make it so that you're not seeing it. But as we've taken these things through our budget committee, that's one, the easily answer, and to say, look, when we move out of here, we're likely gonna remodel the entire building, maybe make it public safety, maybe look at something else, whatever the council directs us to do. When we remodel, when we leave, that makes sense to do that at that time. But that's at the budget committee level that we haven't really dispensed back to the department heads, nor have we really brought to your level here. This is the unvarnished list.
Well, that's why I asked the question, because look, I agree that we're gonna spend $1 million on this building when we repurpose it. I don't know, but I don't wanna spend $45,000 and then tear it out in 2 to 3, 4 years. So,
I'll agree with that, Jared, so.
Well,
So get one more, let's get rid of it.
If you were to talk to the budget committee themselves, they would say, no, we don't want to put it on here. But, and we would say that's probably one that we can hold off on. And there's probably several out there that are similar that we would hold off on. But I was reluctant in talking with the rest of the budget committee of making that determination at the budget committee level and not letting you have insight to the requests coming in. We wanted to have complete transparency.
I wanna be clear that if it's because we need another fridge, then get another fridge, but I don't think that means 45,000.
Yeah, some of the kitchen cabinets are not, so there's really not drawers, they're like office cabinets, so you open them up and your utensils are not, it's, you know what I mean, those type of things. It's not, this is a wish, not a want or a need, so, you know, we gotta weigh everything against itself, you know, and every other request is coming out from every other department.
So what's the HVAC unit replacement in the mobile command center? I'd like to hear more about those.
So those are 2 more things. The HVAC replacement, we do have several HVAC units, some that have been replaced. This was a request to be able to replace them, to be able to have this building go forward. We see that as again, this is now the request versus the budget committee. The budget committee would look at that and say that this is something that would be very eligible for an amendment if one fails. Let's not put it in the budget. Let's come to the council if one fails in the future.
I agree with that. Okay, give me some mobile command center information, please.
So the mobile command center is a request for emergency management to be able to utilize, and communities often will have go through NIMS training, National Incident Management training, where you're conducting your emergencies, your fires, wildland fires, earthquakes, anything like that, utilizing this trailer. And a lot of cities will use a trailer like this to practice by running their incident command during a festival. And you know, they've got patrols and whatnot and everything, and it's all practicing that skill set. For my last community, we were able to go forward and look for grants and get an old FEMA trailer that was given to us. We refurbished it, and we were able to utilize that. So that's another one where the budget committee said, hey, let's take every opportunity to look for grants from FEMA and maybe not put it in the budget. But again, we didn't want it to not bring it to you.
What about our CERT trailers that we have? Those are intended to be able to be used in the event of something like that? Is this just like an enhancement of what's there? I know it's bigger, but what I'm asking is could the CERT trailers serve that need until we were able to get a FEMA grant or some other revenue stream? That's the succinct way of putting it.
Absolutely. And these are the type of discussions that we're having. I guess maybe this, a part of this is, this discussion and getting into the weeds is maybe my fault a little bit, because I had the perception maybe coming in that, that the council wanted to have maybe direct conversations with maybe department heads, because you didn't want to have things filtered out. I want to make sure you see everything, but clearly there are things that would be filtered out.
You didn't do anything wrong. We want to have these conversations. So this isn't a bad thing. We just wanted some clarity, that's all. Can we go back to the, oh, you got another question?
Well, just before we go off, I mean, is this the right time to say, look, I'm one guy that had a question on the kitchen. I believe Brett seconded that, but is this a time to say we're not okay with that right now, or?
I sense that direction right here. It's something that we
But I've only
concur
heard it
with
from two, so I want to make sure that it's.
I guess the next step in this whole process is, we're getting the sense from you on where we should go at the budget committee level, that we can massage this and get it so that we're closer, bringing the revenues and the expenditures and eliminating the gap, bringing it back to you with recommendations that then you can tweak and go up and down.
So to be clear for all of us here, what items are we given direction to maybe remove, and which items are we saying to keep? That's what I wanted to ask before we get rid of this
Do
page.
you want to hear more on the mobile command center?
I guess the question to Councilmember Gray's question, I think I want to hear what items can we find other revenues for and what items can we not? And then that will guide what I'm interested and able to fund with one-time requests.
So just from our particular standpoint, at this meeting, we aren't necessarily looking for the council to say yes or no on particular things. What we're interested in, yes, is exactly what's happening. We want your feedback. We want to hear your comments that you have on that. But we're not looking for a ranking of these items as the council as a body at this point.
I just want to make a comment. I think it would be helpful when we're looking at some of these things on this page as an example. Rather than just a bulk number, what do you intend to do? So when we say Frisbee golf improvements, we're talking about adding Frisbee golf throughout multiple parks? Is that for a specific park? I'm only using that just as an example. The outdoor Christmas tree. How tall is the Christmas tree? Is it a permanent Christmas tree? Are we buying it this year and we're going to buy it again next year? I mean, some of those things are important things just to give some context of what we're agreeing to. And I'm going to use this thing right here as an example of not what we thought we were getting, frankly. And we gave the approval for a budget. We downsized in the screen size and went to something that's really pretty unusable most of the time. So now I look at it and say, I want an explanation before I say yes to it of what we're getting. So I think it's important. It doesn't have to be this long drawn out thing, but if we're talking about the Eagle Point paved trail, what's included in that, just a brief, a couple sentences is probably fine to tell us what it is that we're saying yes or no to.
Yes, so that type of an explanation would be brought forward with the tentative budget for anything that the budget committee is recommending to move forward with the tentative budget.
The problem is that by the time you get to that, you spend all this time on it. If it's not going to live or die, it's maybe easier at this point to say, it's not going to live, don't waste your time on it.
Right. And so again, what we want to do is we want to trust the process in terms of the committee and the administrative process that's going to come forward with that. And then what will happen is, yes, at that administrative level, then you're going to receive, right, you're going to receive a mayor's budget for what it's going to be for running and operating the city. And then we're going to start to break it down and be able to review it and make sure that there's plenty of time, that if there were things that we have discussed here that you didn't see that we brought forward administratively that you want to have added, things that you want to have taken out, that is going to, that part is going to take place after the tentative budget comes forward. So again, part of this is just so that you can see the volume of requests that we have that are coming forward. As a committee of the things that we're reviewing to try to bring you a balanced budget to the level of revenue resources we have and to the level that the council might be okay with in terms of contingencies for fees and so forth, and able to fund some of these items. Because it is kind of along the lines of that. If at this point, a better conversation might be not for these specific items, but how is the council feeling collectively about using general fund balance monies to fund your one-time expenditure requests? How willing are you to be looking at, we'll talk about capital and those project items and the resources that we have available on our April 11th meeting with the council that we have. But fund balance for one-time items in the general fund is really the only resource that we have, unless it was for you to say, hey, one-time items like this are more important than looking at adding personnel, or are a higher priority to the council than looking at some of the wages that we have proposed from that.
Are there any of these things that, like, the trail, the Wi-Fi at Quarry Ride, the Frisbee Golf, those four, to me, and the Christmas tree maybe, could those be impact fee eligible? Can we get some of those things put on our impact fee list for park stuff?
These particular items that are coming forward more than likely would not be impact fee eligible, but it does, again, it depends on what that is from the, Frisbee golf improvements, and as we look at those. But the items typically on the one-time request are not. Those projects that we've deemed impact fee eligible would come forward with the capital plan.
My other question.
But we would always look for resources, like if it's the trail, we might look for grants that are available to help us do trails. We're gonna look for any outside resources we can bring forward to fund these, and those would be the items that you'd start to see. Look, maybe we're recommending this, but only contingent upon us receiving an outside resource, and that might be the way that it moves forward in the tentative budget from that particular standpoint. Or these items, we don't want to touch anything with the general fund balance. We're about 32% is where we're sitting fund balance wise in the general fund right now, which is just under, what did I say? It's like $10.7 million, I think, is where we're at. And you're all aware of how I feel about our reserves, and
Me too.
making sure that we have some of those that are available to us. The reality is we keep waiting for revenue, We have a lot of talk about the future, What we want you to see is we have a list of items that they can't happen until the future, if the future is what we're waiting for when it comes to funding. And it's okay, but we want to make sure we're having the conversation about it, and that that there's not an expectation. I'd hope we don't move that direction, but I've seen it in many communities, which is the tentative budget that comes to the council is with all this work being done that the council never sees, what never made it forward, because there was no way to fund it, but you didn't even know that that was something that was needed, and your decision to look at finding ways to fund it was removed from you, simply because of a feeling that you might not want to have a conversation about something.
I definitely like that you're bringing these things to us, because that's literally our job. So I think we should have this discussion, and I think it's important for us to know this so that when residents ask, we can rattle off this information and help them understand. One other question, and I know we need to move on to something else, but what about our utility sale funds? Are there, I know there's that little pocket of money that's set aside for specific things, but if it doesn't fit in where we want it in the general fund, and it doesn't fit impact fee eligible, maybe as our discussion takes place as a council, we can look at that and go, okay, we could set aside X amount of dollars this year from utility sales so that we can purchase or do some of these more needed projects.
Yes, and utility sales would be something we'll bring up at the capital project level, but it's not restricted for any of those purposes, This is money that's available to the council. We have about $5.6 million, 3.4 of it's not currently appropriated for other projects that was reviewed by the council last year. So it's just sitting as uncommitted resources at this time. And then that would be something, again, that as you start to see the capital projects, as you're looking at your civic campus, as you're looking at these small items, that definitely is a resource for one-time spending.
So can I interject a couple of thoughts? I'm just on this list, I'm gonna just throw this out. Eagle Point Paved Trail, I don't know what that is, but certainly if we can find some grant money, and can we use some of the CB, and I always get this wrong, CBHGWFY, I don't know what it is. But can we use some of those funds? I always mess that up. I'm having a senior moment, so that's where it's at. But can we use some of those funds to finish a portion of that?
Only
Is
if
it in
it's to make the
proximity?
trail ADA compatible, essentially, like there's criteria for those
fine.
federal, but if it was to make it accessible, then, and to do improvements to our trails that allowed more people to access them from an ADA standpoint, absolutely.
So I think if we see that, I think we ought to at least look for some additional funding sources. I think the permanent Wi-Fi at Quarry Ride makes a lot of sense, especially with the farmer's market, with the shop fest and all those other things. I mean, that's a constant issue when you're trying to pay, right? So I see that as a benefit. The Frisbee golf, I don't know. The outdoor Christmas tree, I don't see why we don't get one of our community partners to donate that to the city every year. And let's have a, here, I'm gonna throw this out. Let's have a Meta Christmas tree lighting every year, sponsored by Meta, if they want to participate in that. Or let's have a competition so that you know, it's a privilege and an honor to sponsor that every year, and you get some significant special community recognition for that. So I just think there's ways to approach this that doesn't have to be from general fund dollars. HVAC, no. Command center for me, postpone or wait. And the city hall, I agree with Councilmember Gray, absolutely not at this point in time.
Before we move on, can we just go back quickly to the sheriff slide? I just want to snap a picture of that. I have some questions on that, so I'll just wait. So I just want to ask my question real fast. So
Go ahead.
the $8.35 million is the total budget for that.
That, of course, is us estimating what it would be, including the 4 officers being added, as well as the 4% contract increase, and then these additional 2 officers that are just being brought on, and the full year cost for them.
So that brings us to a total of 31 with the additional ones, or is 31 plus
We
the extra
have
4?
33 approved in the current fiscal year,
Okay.
and so that
So
would bring us to
we'd be adding an
37.
additional 4 to that, so it'd be 37.
Yes.
Thanks.
Yes, and we do have currently we have existing 3 school resource officers in our community. 1 is dedicated at the elementary level as well. And so that is one of those items for consideration if the council wanted to talk about at all making any changes to that, and using using that officer at the new middle school. Otherwise, it does mean, again, pulling on a new school resource officer for that new middle school that will open up.
So my questions on this slide were the 672,000 base cost budget increase. Is that basically the sheriff's office COLA? Is that their?
So, no, it's not their COLA. So only of that 672, only about 271 of it is gonna be like a rough 4% contract increase price.
So
right?
what's the rest
You
of it?
have the full annual cost of the patrol officers, where we only did partial years for our new hires. And then when we're doing like our budgeting, again, we're running off of estimates versus what the final contract numbers are related to those sworn officers. So I'm saying like what I'm paying right now in my contract, and then factoring in the 2 additional patrol officers plus a 4% base, it's about $672,000.
Okay, it's the 4% plus
Yeah.
the 2 patrol
Yeah.
officers, well, the 4.
Yeah.
Got it. And I'm gonna say this, I'm 6 or 8 years ago, I was like convinced that we had to get our own police department. I really backed off that, realizing how great the sheriff's department is. I think especially, I'm gonna say this, with the city hall, we anticipate repurposing this building possibly as public safety. Are we prepared, or what is the time frame for us to look again into a local police department? Because I mean, we're paying almost $9 million a year. At the time, it was $4 million. I think even Terrence did a study on that, if I'm not mistaken. But it was gonna be $4 million upfront cost, do you remember, Mayor, to supply the cars and so forth, and then about a $4 or $5 million a year salaries, and that was 15 employees ago, right? But I think we're at a point, it's when our budget was under $5 million, but knocking on $9 million a year, I think we're at that point again where, especially saying, we're gonna phase into this, if we know that I'm gonna use 3 years, I don't want it to be 5, I want it to be 3, into a new city hall, and we need a year to kind of phase into that, and we need to start planning. I mean, are we at a point where we need to have that conversation?
The good thing is whatever money, whatever capital we put toward it, we don't lose, right? Any investment we make.
So these cars that we buy every time they put a new guy, we keep those cars?
Yes, and when they sell those cars, then we receive the funds from that, yes.
So is all of the equipment belong to Eagle Mountain then?
It is not an asset of Eagle Mountain Cities, no. It belongs to the county, and it is tracked as one of their assets. It's rolled into our price in terms of what we pay. We're paying for those cars, right, in our contracted price, as well as their equipment and so forth. And in an exchange, then yes, those vehicles and their equipment and gear that they currently have would come with us from that particular standpoint.
So that actually makes me feel a lot better, because we're talking about that upfront cost. We've already covered that upfront cost, but now we just need to,
Well, we haven't covered the big upfront costs. So certainly repurposing this building, and there are other services. I don't know how deep we want to go into this, but certainly the level, okay, just let's take something like, in crime investigations or something. So, we might have 2 people on staff that's what they do. They're detectives, they investigate. And, if one is on vacation or something, and how much experience are they going to have, following up on crimes here in Eagle Mountain? Well, currently what we have available to us is we can pull, I'd have Deputy Knut speak to this Knutson if he were here, but he could, let's say we had a significant crime here that really needed some thorough investigation, he can pull from whatever resources Utah County has.
but I think as a city in Utah County, we still have that resource if it was a major, as far as SWAT and things like that. And then I also wanted to plant the seed that I think we could do some interlocal agreements with Saratoga Springs, our neighbor, to say, hey, in the task forces, let's join up. The patrol, obviously, the day-to-day stuff. I agree that the argument's always been, we get a lot of extra benefit with the sheriff's department. That's why we've stayed there. But I think we're getting to a size where we're probably not gonna create a SWAT team, but maybe in cooperation with the neighboring departments, we might.
I think it's important to remember that the way that the Saratoga Springs is set up is they're co-opting with Bluffdale. So and they are.
And they hate that, by the way.
They're helping us, we're helping them, they're helping Bluffdale. That's why we see Saratoga Springs
I don't-
officers in here as well. So that co-op is kind of already happening to some degree.
See, and Mayor, to your point, I don't think we're talking about getting rid of them today, but I think that we're 3 years away, and I think that's something that we need to start talking about.
The big issue is space. City Hall, you're dead on. If they're gonna come with us, or if it's gonna be remodeling here, again, dead on. But there are other costs that we do need to roll into that and consider, such as prosecutorial fees, indigent fees for those that you're providing, public defense for, transportation fees to and from the jail, evidence storage fees, all those type of things. Is it insurmountable? No. It just needs to be considered.
My feeling is we're paying that now.
Correct.
We're paying for that.
Yep.
So I think we need to start preparing and possibly budgeting for that transition, and that's why I bring it up here. And I think it's time to.
Well, and part of that is, we have 4 capital facility plans going forward. The next 2 that still need to come forward are Parks and Trails and Public Safety. Doing your capital facility plan for public safety and including a public safety building in that, recognize we need to do the study, we need to do the IFFP, IFA, and then we start collecting impact fees that could be used within a 6-year period. You're right to say that we ought to talk about having the discussion going forward. Can we do it today? No. Can we do it 3 to 5 years from now? Sure.
Yeah, I think, and I don't know what that means budget-wise. What do we need to start talking about? That's all I have on this page.
Okay, I do want to just provide one quick clarification. So on the equipment and the assets, if they're fully depreciated, they just automatically transfer to us. But if like, if the useful life of their patrol vehicles is 5 years and we're only in year 4 or 5, we have to pay the difference between the current book value and that depreciation, and then the equipment transfers to us. Okay, so that, just for that particular caveat. So in terms of saving for that though, the only way to save for that is to start producing revenue for it. So again, for an example, just public safety, right? We're talking an $8.3 million and I bring in $2.6 million in property tax. Okay, so I'm covering a fourth of the cost of public safety with what we have in terms of a secure, dedicated resource, of which is just general primary government. That's one of the primary purposes for why you would have a property tax levy.
Didn't we just
from
start an
that,
impact
so.
fee, public safety impact fee recently?
So we do have a public safety impact fee. It's $45 per building permit, and then about
But should-
$145 per
That
square
should probably be
foot.
evaluated then, right?
So,
That's why you put that project within that plan, and then public safety impact fees might go up to $300, $400, $500, something like that.
and so your goal might be that it can cover a debt service payment or something to that in terms of your costs. But you have to subtract out the size of facility that they're already using from any of that from an expansion standpoint, and that kind of hampers things just a little bit. But, so we do have a lot that is going on, and I know that you're hearing that, right? Where revenue's tight, we're gonna have, I don't know, I keep looking forward to those big bucks that, you guys keep telling me we're gonna roll in here in another few years, so it'll be an exciting time if we start to see some of those revenue streams. From a property tax standpoint too, one thing that does help us is any type of economic development that we can do, because again, those commercial properties and their equipment and stuff is all taxed at the full value versus the 55% there on the residential side of things, so.
Did any of you guys have anything else on this page? I want to go back to the other pages if you don't.
So we actually are at a hard, fast stop because we have planning commission that's gonna need to start in here. So I think that we can, if you guys are okay with it, we can just throw a budget item discussion on to the back end, like of the council's agenda for next week and try to continue some more of this conversation. Or hold a separate meeting if you want another meeting to keep going, so.
I just want to say really quickly that I would really like for us to start having a complete refresh of what's going on with impact fees and not wait, because if it's a 6-year thing, chances are we're going to need that public safety funds by that 6-year window. So like, I want us to have this on an agenda soon, Mayor. That's my request.
It's under review. It is one of the capital facility plans that's under review now, so.
One of the main things that I've been waiting on is the arborist. It's been on the list year after year, and we continue to talk about it, and I know.
Well, we do have an arborist. This is the second.
Yeah, and that's why I'm bringing it up.
And they need a second because you need safety. Once a person's lifting up on a lift and whatnot, you need someone else to be there.
And we do have a request for 2, so there are 2, just one's on one page and one's on the other as well.
I think it would be helpful if we have a hard stop now, if you could send us this. That way, we have all of our questions ready, and maybe even we could email you the questions as well. That way we can not spend a lot of time in work session on this, but get the answers that we need. Did I make sense?
Yeah. I think
Yeah,
that sounds
and I
great.
agree.
There's just, because again, from my standpoint, there's a lot of things where we might guess what your questions are, so it's always really helpful. If you do have questions, even if we were to answer them, we don't mind that they need to be brought up at city council, but it helps us to actually be able to address your questions and make the most use of your time, so.
Maybe I'll just clarify a little bit more, and Donna, if you disagree with what I'm saying here. If you sent this to us in advance of this meeting, so we have a chance to review through all of it, we don't spend all of our time with you reading to us what's on here, and we can actually discuss what our feelings are about what is in the content of that. I think that makes the discussion more beneficial, at least from my perspective as a council member, because we do spend a lot of time just listening to somebody read something we could have read in advance and then have a discussion about the content of what's in there.
And part of that, and then I will only say one other thing, but part of that is the nature, to some extent, of some of the budgetary items, which is we want to make sure that you're aware of the things that we're reviewing and moving along in that standpoint. But we most certainly can work on trying to get you stuff in advance. We just want to make sure that you understand from that expectation is that we're just putting our feelers out as we're continuing to move forward, and but we aren't looking for, again, this necessarily decision body, making stuff at this level, so.
Okay, with that, yeah, we have a hard stop, so we will adjourn this meeting at 5:04.
Thank you all. Great meeting.